back to another video feature of the Immersive World's Handbook. As you can see, I am aboard the SkyTrain, and I am at Changi International Airport in Singapore. And I want to give you a video overview today that focuses on the amazement I think that I've had with this airport in terms of all its features, its immersive features, its themed features, and many other sites that certainly are to be seen that have such an experiential component to them. And one of my main emphases in this feature is to talk about just how unexpected it is to see these levels of spaces at an airport like this one. So let's go inside and take a look here at Changi Airport in Singapore.
And the first opportunity to take a look here is this amazing kinetic rain sculpture. And this, as I'll talk about in just a bit, is one of the more iconic features that you will see at the airport. The improvisational nature, the moving nature of this particular sculpture, I think, makes it such a stunning visual attraction for the guest. Prior to this, I recall seeing a visual sculpture similar to this at Midway Airport in Chicago, except that one is static and this one is moving. And the sense of movement, I feel, as a metaphor, is a fairly powerful one. On the one hand, of course, an airport is about movement and travel, and sometimes the discomfort that one feels when he or she is going from one place to the next. I don't know about you, but I sometimes find airports and airplanes to be very stressful spaces. And so I think the soothing nature of the sculpture, all the while it's giving us movement, the kinetics of movement, is something that is quite remarkable when you think about what you're about to see in the remainder of the airport space. So as a metaphor, beginning with the sculpture, I think it's quite an important place to begin with as far as setting the stage for what we will see as a guest and also today as a viewer of this particular video on this amazing themed and immersive space in the city of Singapore. And I have to say, I certainly could watch video of this sculpture for quite a long time. But let's move on to the idea of the airport's identity, and specifically how this airport in Singapore challenges the guests' expectations. And you see this here in this image that I discovered in one of the trams that connects the three terminals, basically visually emphasizing the fact that this is a unique airport and one unlike any other in the world. So in this sense, I think Changi has the opportunity to be a trendsetter and to do everything that airports typically do not do, which, as you will gather throughout this feature, they offer free, exciting, immersive, and themed spaces and entertainment to guests from around the world. You can see here that they've also used the kinetic rain sculpture, the sunflower garden, as part of their branding. And if you watch other videos that I've done in Singapore, you know that a lot of these attractions throughout the city have opportunities for branded use. And in these cases, it's another good example of how you can use individual attractions as part of the overall identity, and in this case, in further emphasizing the challenge to the expectation of the guest who assumes that an airport is dull and not very immersive. And here we go on to the first impressions, and specifically these are the first impressions that I had when I visited Changi for the first time. And I had certainly heard a lot about this airport and tried to do some background research, look for video and images, but I wasn't fully prepared for what I saw. And quite a few times, just as I exited the plane and began to go into the baggage claim area, then following that into the customs immigration area, I found that I was in awe. I found that I was completely unprepared for the fact that this level of theming, this level of immersion was present in an airport. And at this moment, I hadn't had the opportunity to see all that you're going to see in the rest of this video, which specifically happens when you depart Arrival, you actually do not get to participate in as much of these immersive spaces perhaps as one might like. But you can see here right before immigration, and customs, which is to the left there, amazing sculptures, amazing indoor gardens, setting that first impression of the space. More amazement here as I saw for the first time a slide, a 3-story slide within an airport space. Again, further defying the expectation of what an airport might be. And you can see here some of my video, I was trying to capture the height. It's a little hard to tell here, but trying to capture the height of this slide that is there for kids and adults who might want to partake in this very interesting experience inside the airport. And so perhaps as a summary, we could say that the first impression is one of the spectacular nature of the space. So next I would like to focus on the map, and specifically how Changi Airport uses its extensive spaces in such a way to create this amazing set of connections with the guests. And like a large museum or a theme park, the airport here offers the guest an extensive guidebook and map. And I think the significance of this is that, quite obviously, when you see this particular guidebook, you are somewhat in awe of the fact that there is so much to see and do inside an airport. And as I stressed throughout this video feature, this is something that contrasts with most typical airport spaces. So in addition to seeing this map and guidebook, you can also get on your tablet or your smartphone and partake in the visual version of this. So just like the printed guidebook, you can see here that you have the map that shows you locations of your favorite cafes and shopping experiences. What's cool here is that you can also get on and click just on the section in the app that features the attractions. And I actually used this when I was running around. I only had 1 hour to catch my flight back to the States. I used this app and I was able to see in each of the 3 terminals, 1, 2, and 3, exactly what was available and where it was on the map. So this was fairly useful for me because I was short on time, and even if you're not short on time, quite clearly having an application like this allows the airport to create that connection with the guest. And the traditions that have begun in places like museums and theme parks are then continued in a space like this, where the guest is allowed to see all the places and experiences. And this metaphor, I think, of the map itself allows the guests to have a greater sense of connection with this particular space. And as you can see on the app as well, there's a lot of 3D imagery available.
Well, here I am waiting for SkyTrain to take me to Terminal 2. I'm just kind of running through the airport trying to see everything, because there is so much to see, strangely enough, in an airport like this one. And you can see they even produce a guidebook that has all the spaces listed, and you're seeing many of these here on this video feature, just depending on what I have time to see. In particular, I have to say the social tree, which I showed you from Terminal 1, is really, really impressive, just in terms of the creativity that went into this, and the fact that they've leveraged our personal attraction to social media and used that in some significant ways in a design sense. So I will take you now to Terminal 2 and show you more of the sites there.
And actually here you can see one of many examples within the airport of the use of mapping to orient the guest within the space. And in just a bit, I'll be talking about the significance of this in terms of the creation of diverse forms of space within the airport. And the next point I want to emphasize is this idea of spatialization, specifically moving beyond typical spaces and creating multiple spaces for the guest. I don't want to suggest that Changi Airport is a theme park, but I think in some ways I can see the influences here of a theme park on a space like this. This is one of many gardens that you can find within the airport. And what is key here, just like in a theme land of a theme park, is that your experience is changing over time. So the experience that you have with this particular cactus garden is different from the spatial, personal experience you'll have with the sunflower garden later and all the other spaces. So what is key here is creating multiple spaces for the guest and then allowing the guests to get wrapped up within each of those unique spaces. So spatialization and diverse spatialization is extremely key, I think, in the success of this amazing, amazing airport in Singapore.
You can see here more of the airport theming. They have a whole Disney thing, which is themed around different parts of the world. And now I'm trying to find quickly the, you can see here, the gardens and the entertainment deck. So let's go check out the entertainment deck. Below us is the Enchanted Garden, which I showed you. Okay, gaming room. Whoa. Movie theater? Sunflower garden. Ah, pull, that would help. Whoa. Sunflowers amongst the airplanes. How's this for an airport?
As we leave the sunflower garden, I want to speak a little bit about theming the spaces and specifically using theming in some unique ways. And so one of the things that you note at the airport is this display of various Disney characters, and specifically the Disney characters go along with different parts of the world, so the airport is paying some homage to other spaces. In this case, near the social media tree, we have the New York section, which I will focus on the other sections here in just a bit. There's a map here that then describes to the guest, I would say in the sense of a quest, the various attractions. This is not unlike a theme park in which you say, here's where you find this one, Terminal 2, the next one is in Terminal 3, and so forth. And here are all the spaces then that we see via the Disney theme. The first one being Spain, and the next one is Switzerland. And following that, we get Japan. And you can see that they've done a marvelous job in each of these cases of really differentiating the theming. And here's another shot from a different angle. And then we have what is the largest one, which is right before you enter, after the ticketing area and before you enter into security. This is the Neuschwanstein-inspired Germany with the massive, massive castle. And I can't tell you how many people I saw early in the morning snapping photos and video of this and the many other amazing theme spaces within the airport here in Singapore. And as we saw at the beginning of this section, we also have the US represented via New York City. As I suggested earlier, I think anytime you use theming and differentiated forms of theming within a space, certainly you don't expect to see it in an airport, but when you see it in a space like this, you can give the guest a sense of fantasy, particularly in this case, when he or she least expects it. And this is a fitting scene here as we move on to the next important aspect of Changi Airport in Singapore. And this is specifically the significance of bringing nature to us. If you've looked at my other videos in Singapore, you're aware of the fact that Singapore is a city in which nature plays an important role. And I think it's quite appropriate as you see the koi pond here, and in just a second you'll see the butterfly garden. It's quite important to realize that nature as a metaphor, as part of the city and country's identity, has an important role to play, and so it's fitting to have it represented indoors and outside in the airport.
In Singapore. And if you know anything about this airport, it's one of the top airports in the world, maybe the top airport in the world for things like themed and immersive spaces, which are the spaces that I, of course, happen to study. And as we walk through the garden here, I'm looking for butterflies, and maybe it's too early to see any of them. But in any case, I wanted to take you inside to give you a sense of how immersive an airport truly can be. So we can take a look as we walk around here.
And I've already given you some hints of many of the amazing spaces. In this case, we're looking at the cactus garden. Again, I think for the guests, this is a welcome sight, but an unexpected sight, because you don't expect this level of experiencing nature within an airport. It just simply doesn't seem to fit, and this is why this contrast and this surprise with the typical that you get in most airports, I think, is so startling to the guests when you visit Changi Airport in Singapore. And we just end up here at the Sunflower Garden, just overlooking some of the runways. And as we leave the Sunflower Garden here at the airport, I want to focus on this idea of how the airport takes its attractions very seriously. I think an airport is a challenging space to use theming and immersion because it's one of those spaces that some have described as actually a non-space, in the sense that you are in transition. And as a result, I think it's very easy either to just simply say, we won't offer the guest anything, or you offer them something that maybe isn't appropriate for an airport. So I think in this case, as you can see from some of the attractions, they offer us some educational opportunities to learn a little bit about the flora and fauna that you see during your stay at the airport. And I think there are aspects then of these spaces that one might typically see in a museum, and as a result of this, the airport has an opportunity to offer the guest a bit more in terms of educational opportunities than you would typically see in airport spaces or consumer spaces similar to an airport. And so I'm showing you just a bit more of the video here of this amazing space, the butterfly garden. You can see here the pineapples that are there, presumably for the enjoyment of the butterflies in this space. And as we leave this space, I would like to focus on the idea of relaxation. And I think for me, this is one of the most important aspects that could be offered in an airport, but typically is not. And again, the expectation in a typical airport is that it won't be relaxing, it won't be comfortable, and certainly today we know that many airlines have cut back on the services that they offer to guests. And so I think an airport like this as a model for airports of the future could offer something quite important in terms of inspiration. Relaxation certainly should be part of travel, but so typically it is not. And so in this sense, if we use the idea of relaxation as a metaphor, I think we begin to understand that Changi is setting itself apart from most other airports in the world. And right now I'm showing you some additional video I shot. And what I was trying to do here was actually discover the outdoor pool area. Again, this pool is available to the guests free of charge. And you can see as you enter the space, there is some minor theming that they've done within the space. And it's just at the top of the stairs here, if you bear with me as I walk up. And you can see the pool right there. And the next area I would like to focus on is the importance of aesthetics, both in terms of enrichment and entertainment. More and more, I believe that airports are offering guests a sense of the importance of art and aesthetics. And these are some examples here that I'm showing you, and I certainly could have picked many others. These are some examples of pottery, and I didn't give you a shot of the inside. Actually, I did right here. You can see just a little bit. There is some text in there that describes the style of pottery. And as I showed you earlier, this amazing kinetic sculpture certainly gives us an opportunity to reflect on the glory of particular styles of aesthetics, in this case, kinetic sculpture. And my thought is that airports are more and more offering guests aesthetic opportunities, and I think this is quite important because we, for many years, maybe got too wrapped up in the idea that an airport is only about the travel side, that non-space side of travel, the consumption side, the branding side that you get with stores and certainly eateries, but art is another opportunity to give the guest something different. And we see one more example here of one of the amazing sculptures within the inside of the airport. And as we leave this space, we move on to the important issue of all the free opportunities that are given to the guests within the Changi airport. Everything from free internet to free video games, free TV, free movies, free swimming pools. And I think this is quite significant. Again, if you follow some of my points previously, travel is often stressful. Airports are often mundane, so one of the ways to make immediate connections with the guests is to give the guests this sense of experiences all the while they are free, and thus that much more memorable to the guest after he or she has left the airport. And of course, a number of airports around the world have figured out that it's probably a pretty good idea to let people do basic things for free, like charge their cell phones and tablets and mobile devices. But Changi, as you might see throughout these images and videos I'm sharing today, has gone well beyond that, creating entire cubicle areas and stations where people can do just about everything, not just charge their mobile devices, but reach out to the rest of the world and their friends and family, all the while getting ready to board a plane. And the next issue that we might address here is the availability of technology within the space. And I would actually call this monumental technology, in part, as you can see here from the social media tree, that they've thought about it in some ways that are quite unique. And the next point I'll be making following technology is the importance of the social connections within this space. So clearly, a lot of the technology here, in addition to LAN video gaming, is internet, social media, technology that allows you to stay connected with the world, and thus increasing also the identity of Changi Airport as you are emailing and sending photos to your friends and family around the world. And you can see here I'm walking through one of the experience zones in the airport, a lot of opportunities for using media, and then just here is one of these kiosks where you can send a message to friends, and it has this whole social media focus to it. And very related to this is the inspiration of the social, specifically trying to make our experience with others around us as we travel in the airport and on planes around the world, make that experience a better experience. Certainly, theme parks have taught us a lot in terms of this idea of hanging out with others, having social connections, but enjoying those connections, because sometimes themed and immersive spaces certainly can promote sociality, but people are not too excited about having to share the spaces with others. And I think Changi shows us that you can both share a space within the airport for those immediate social connections with strangers, and at the same time, as you see here with one of many social media kiosks, you can also make an opportunity for the guests to share experiences with others around the world. And so the social experiences of this particular airport, I think, are very, very significant in terms of its success with the guest. And next, I'd like to focus on the significance of personalization within the space of the airport. In many writings on themed immersive spaces, I've indicated that this is one of the most important and significant aspects of the space. Guests in today's day and age of branding and consumer society can often feel disconnected and a part of the crowd. And I think what you'll see here in a second with their social media tree, as we pass some of the themed areas here, is that you don't have this sense of disconnection and being just part of a crowd. In fact, this is one opportunity among many opportunities that are both technological and immersive that Changi, I think, is effectively creating a personalized space and thus making an even greater connection with the guest within that space. And so the premise here is you're looking up at the social media tree and you can choose any number of options here, taking a photo. So I took the photo here, and then you can upload the photo to the social media tree. It'll play, other guests will see that, and I'll show you in just a second as well that essentially you can share this with others on Facebook. You can receive a copy of it via your email, as you can see here. So a wonderful way to personalize the space for the guest and to make a much more lasting connection with that guest. And so what happens here is you put in your email address, and then the idea is that when you get back home, you will get, as you'll see in a second, a copy of the image. And I've written in other accounts of themed and immersive spaces that this is, in a sense, taking and extending the space beyond the space itself. So when I return home, there's an email that greets me, and you'll see here just in a second the text of that email. Which is right here. And after this, you'll see the image that greeted me when I got home. So the importance here of personalization, I think, is that you have a sense of the space even after you've left that space. So leaving the social media tree, we go to the important issue of feedback and its role in the overall guest experience. I was quite amazed when I saw in so many of the spaces this instant feedback system. Basically these simple video boards with touchscreens that allow the guests to immediately rate the experiences. And this is present right after you leave the immigration area. It's present in the restrooms and through many of the features, as you can see here, including the butterfly garden. In the Immersive Worlds Handbook, I make the point that feedback, guest feedback, is very significant in contemporary spaces. If you don't have an opportunity for the guests to give feedback, and certainly we do have spaces like Yelp where guests can write reviews of the spaces, but I believe that this is never enough. And so Changi has figured this out and has basically shown us the significance of immediate feedback and giving the guests an opportunity to give feedback in such a way that is very quick yet very telling in terms of the nature of the experiences within the spaces. And as we leave this unique example of feedback, you might be wondering, what about retail? Are there retail opportunities in an airport like this? And the answer is a definitive yes. Certainly there are high-end stores. There is a hawker food court, mini cafes, and all the typical accoutrements that you might see in an airport. But to emphasize some earlier points, I'm not essentially focusing on retail and some of the more mundane offerings of airports, because it's my feeling that what Changi is trying to do in terms of its identity is to actually go beyond some of these experiences. And one thought I did have was, by offering a lot of these immersive experiences and free experiences, do retailers actually ever find that they are unable to sell as many products or experiences to the guests because of all these other amazing distractions that are around the guests within these spaces? As a bit of a diversion here, I wanted to go online and read some of the social media and Yelp reviews and other feedback out there and get a sense exactly what do guests think of Changi Airport. And going into it, my assumption was that people would be as amazed with the space as I was. And indeed, this was somewhat confirmed, at least in this cursory look at Yelp reviews. And I think in this case, there were over 100 reviews of the airport, and as you can see, the majority of these are in the 5 and 4-star range. A couple of 3 stars, and as I'll show you, very few, just one example of a 1-star review. And this particular review actually surprised me, and I'll read you a bit of it here. And this person said basically that the airport was okay, nothing too special about it. I've heard great things, but I didn't really see anything spectacular. And the review continues here. There was a cool dancing raindrop display thing at the entrance, but that was about it. And after I read this review, my only thought was that this guest to the airport, maybe didn't see much of the airport. I really don't know how you could visit Changi Airport in Singapore and not have the sense that you have visited one of the most amazing airports, and I would say one of the most amazing immersive theme space that I've ever seen in the world. And I would close on this fact and talk about an earlier point in which I said that airports have often been called non-spaces, and I guess I would say that Changi Airport in many ways is the un-airport, in the fact that it offers so many things that other airports do not. Now, I should say, as I mentioned earlier in terms of aesthetics, that there are airports around the world that have done more with theming and done more with offering some levels of immersion to the guest. I'm showing you a few images here from Dallas's airport, and I think in many ways Dallas has done some very interesting things with public art and sculpture. There are many services available that allow the guest to have a sense of immersion while he or she is traveling within the airport space. And I'll show you another example here as well. This is Fort Lauderdale Airport. And Fort Lauderdale Airport has done some interesting things with theming and specifically showing the guest a bit about aviation history with famous aviators, and as you'll see in the next image, focusing more on the significance of aviation history through iconic symbols and aspects of that industry. And I guess I would say that perhaps those examples are rare, and certainly the examples of Changi Airport are even more rare. And I won't mention the airport here, but this is an American airport, and I happened to see this particular site when I was visiting the airport, and you can imagine, after you have just seen all these amazing images and videos of Changi Airport in Singapore, of how I probably felt at this point. Indeed, I was immersed, but I was immersed in something that I didn't find terribly pleasant in a sensory sense or aesthetic sense. And so overall, I would say that the airport in Singapore, Changi Airport, is one of the most unique themed immersive spaces I've ever seen. I can't say enough about the space, and all I could offer is that I hope you have the opportunity to go and visit the space sometime in the near future. Indeed, as everyone has said, it's one of the few airports, maybe the only airport in the world, that you might actually be upset with yourself given the fact that you haven't had at least 5 or 6 hours to spend in the airport and to see all these spaces. And so here's my final comment that I recorded at Changi Airport from the social media tree. So please come back for additional video features for spaces like this and many others around the world.